I'm so happy today to have Austin Daniel here. Thanks for
Hey.
coming.
Yeah, thank you for having
Um,
me.
yeah, I want to say you're the first Oregon. Well, that's not true. I had a guy from Eugene, I think, that's running for another position. That might be for Congress, though, actually, when I think about it. But yeah, thanks for coming. I think you're one of the few Oregon candidates
hmm
that I've had, like state level candidates.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
so everyone
I
else
have a
is
lot
more
of
like,
city and county and
yeah, I noticed that because you recently had Sandeep Valley for City Council
yeah,
District 3, and I love that guy. We
he's
kind of
great. Yeah.
align on a lot of things.
And I have a lot, well, not a lot. I have at least a few more city council candidates. There's like 30 or 40 people running. It's kind of
It's a
insane,
lot,
but
a lot to chase down.
but yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah, I just wanted to start with saying like I was reading a lot about you the past week, and I think we have a lot in common.
hmm
Same exact age,
Yeah,
which
37.
I don't know. That's just funny. And both, at least according to what I was reading, we kind of shifted in 2020 politically.
hmm Yeah.
Um, I'm still a registered Democrat, which I don't know. Some people might say I should change that, but yeah, I've definitely, as the left has, I would say, gone more insane. I've stayed in the middle,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and I think that's where a lot of Portlanders are. At least it seems like that to me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I was just curious. Did you want to say anything about that stuff of like how 2020 changed you and
Yeah, well, so there was so much propaganda that was extremely powerful during, the BLM riots of 2020 and the pandemic, and it had gotten a hold of me for a little bit. Like, the political spectrum had shifted from where the Democrats of like 8+ years ago were very moderate, kind of like closer to the center of the political spectrum. But then as a result of all of these, things happening in the world, it really started to shift into far left without us really even knowing that or even identifying that. And, I went with it because, I mean, by virtue of living in Portland, you're just surrounded by that culture and that type of like ethos that's just going around from just everybody around you. And I
mm,
was I was in acupuncture school at the time, so I was just surrounded by this sort of collegiate level atmosphere. And so everyone was like gung ho into like BLM and all these things. And it was, also when you're like trapped in your home during lockdowns, the only thing you can do is like sit on social media or watch the news. And so we were
mm,
pretty much inundated by it. It was hard to escape. And and just as a result of the way the news propagandized the Trump presidency and this concepts of racism, we all wanted to fight racism. And I was never far left in the sense that I like went out into the BLM riots and started like bashing in windows or like
mm,
destroying the elk statue thinking that I was
right,
fighting racism.
which I think is still gone. I think is
It is still
waiting for
gone.
it.
It's
Yeah.
so sad. It's like the coolest thing ever. And
Hmm.
but what I did is I would go onto my social media, onto like Facebook,
Hmm.
and I would identify any of my old friends from the past who had listed that they were Republican in their bio, and I would chew them out for it. I would
Oh wow.
basically virtue signal and be like, "How could you do this? Like, how could you be a Republican? Like, don't you know that's
Yeah.
racist?"
I'm
And
laughing, but it's funny because I used to kind of do that too when I like
yeah,
pre 2020.
it
I would just look at people like that and be like disgusted and
It
like,
it felt good because we genuinely thought we were doing the right thing. We
mhm,
really thought that we were fighting the enemy, trying to make social change and make progress. And it was sad because these are people that I had grown up with, people who are very good, well-intended, good-hearted people who know me. They don't care that I'm a gay person of color. They love me anyway. They appreciate, the content of my character. And it was politically convenient for me to ignore any of their defenses. Like they would say, well, I don't even really like Trump. It was just, picking between the lesser of two evils, and we just couldn't vote for
mhm,
Biden. Or even one of my friends, this white guy who I had sung in choir with, one of the gentlest people I've ever met, not a single bad bone in his body. He married a Mexican woman, and he said, how could I be racist? I married a Mexican woman. And
mhm,
I had the audacity of accusing him of fetishizing her and using her as like basically like a microaggression so that he could get
mm,
away with,
mm.
being a racist. It's like, what? And so I ended up blocking a lot of them because I didn't think that they were being receptive when it was actually me. I wasn't being receptive. And it was probably around 2021 somewhere where the pandemic policies and procedures kind of divided the Democratic Party. I noticed when I took a step back and I looked at the bigger picture, I saw that there were a lot of Democrats who just happened to be aligning with a lot of Republicans. And I was like, what is going on here? This is kind of strange. And so it's like every time we got hit with propaganda, it just seemed to divide people more and more and more. And that's when I decided to just like really, take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and then I internalized in myself like what part was I playing in all of this?
Mm.
And that's when I realized that I was being inadvertently divisive. There was nothing unifying about what I was doing. And I'm a Libra. I'm like inherently a very diplomatic mediator. I'm a very fair person, and so I kind of just basically went through this spiritual epiphany, this sort of awakening, where I was like, "Wow, this is what I'm doing is actually wrong." And
Mm.
so I went back and unblocked every one of those people on
I was wondering,
Facebook,
yeah, yeah.
and I sent them this heartfelt apology, like, "I cannot believe what I had said to you guys. I am so sorry. Can you please forgive me?" And not one of them hesitated. They were really surprised. They didn't think that I ever would do that because if you just look at the mentality of the far left, they're pretty stuck in it.
Mm.
And I don't want to demonize the far left because obviously I was part of that at
Mhm,
one point.
mhm.
And again, we're all very well intended. I think they have really big hearts and they really mean well. They really do feel like they're fighting the enemy and doing the
Yeah,
right thing.
yeah.
But when you're so propagandized and blinded by that, blinded by good intentions, you're not really able to see the unintended consequences of otherwise well intended efforts. And so I'm just really glad that I was able to pull myself out of that and revert back to this sort of moderate stance to where we were, 8+ years ago. And what I had discovered is that, most Republicans, if not all the ones that I know at least, they're actually quite moderate as well. Like they're very accepting of the LGBTQIA2 plus community and
Mhm.
Black, Indigenous people of color. They're really not racist like the propaganda was convincing us. And so that's just when I realized, wow, there's actually a lot of moderates. We don't make a lot of noise politically. The people who make the most political noise are going to be the people who are like on the far left and the far right. And they pretend to like speak on behalf of their entire party when the moderates who don't make a lot of noise, they're like, actually, we don't really align with you guys.
Right.
And so I think it's important that us in the middle start, speaking up a little bit more and getting more representation. And like the news, for instance, they're very polarizing. It's like it's either far left or far right news. And
It's almost their business model now.
yeah, yeah, and it's so bizarre because I don't ever remember it being like that when I was a kid. I remember the news being pretty,
Mhm. It's
bipartisan or
neutral
nonpartisan.
as the
Yeah,
goal, yeah.
yeah, right. And I think it was what, maybe just the propaganda as a result of maybe the Trump presidency when things started to
Yeah.
get real crazy. And yeah, I don't even have anything against Trump really anymore. He's not my favorite. I don't want him to be president. Not because I hate him or anything, but I just think he's an oaf, and I don't really think
Yeah.
he. I
Yeah.
don't really, and I don't want Biden either. I did make
Yeah,
the
I was
mistake of voting for Biden.
I was gonna
I
say I'm and I had a guest my guest last week was a Republican actually, but he was saying I don't want either candidate. And I'm kind of
Yeah,
in that
I
boat
don't
of like
I
I
don't
just don't
either.
want this race again, like,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah, not again. And it's just too divisive. And again, I'm a Libra. I just want everybody to get along.
Yeah,
You
that's funny.
know?
Yeah, I was laughing that you mentioned that because I've never said it on the show, but I'm a Scorpio, and my first tattoo that I got when I was 18 is right here. It's a Scorpio symbol,
Uh-huh.
but I don't believe in it as much as I used to. But that's interesting to
Uh-huh.
frame it that way, and like I
Yeah.
don't even know what that means for me politically
Uh-huh.
or
Uh-huh.
whatever. I don't know.
Well, I mean, my favorite time era politically, which I wasn't even involved in, it was back in like 2011. It was back when there was the Occupy Wall Street
Yeah,
movement.
I was in the news, and I remember it was a crazy time because they were there for
hmm
months.
I wasn't
The art
involved, but
blocks.
I watched it and I supported it from the sidelines. And, the Occupy Wall Street movement, that was with the Democrats. And
Hmm.
then the Republicans, they had their own version of the same thing, the Tea Party movement.
Right, right, right.
And that was actually the first time that both the left and the right finally aligned on what really needed to be done. It's like uniting the 99% and really like sticking it to the top 1% who are kind of like the arbiters of everything,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of controlling everything, including the media. And they didn't like that. They didn't like that we were actually, you know, figuring out who was really, behind the curtain, pulling all the strings. And so their tactic was to smear us, make us look like we were uneducated, that we didn't really know how the world or economics worked.
Hmm.
And they did a really good job of, dividing and conquering us, especially when after that, since then, they created all this propaganda that divided us up, like between black versus white, Democrat versus Republican,
Hmm.
cis versus trans, gay versus straight,
Hmm.
unvaccinated versus vaccinated, Palestine versus Israel, like all
There's
these
so
different
many. Yeah,
things. And
yeah.
now, and anytime you politicize anything, any topic that becomes politicized, it makes it almost impossible to solve because you have this divisive binary. It's like it's us
Yeah.
versus them. You have to pick a side, and no one's ever willing to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to be this like voice of sanity. It's like, no, there are actually a lot of people who don't want to pick a side. We want everyone to just get along. And so that's kind of my ethos and what I want to bring to waking up Oregonians.
I like it. Yeah, I really yeah. It's one of the things tell people a lot why I started this. One of the reasons I started this show is because like things are so divisive that people can't even like talk about that stuff, and it just drives me crazy. Like people, it's like it's okay to disagree. Like you
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
without like getting like violent or whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Like we
The
can have opinions,
reactivists.
and
Yeah.
but yeah, it's got really divisive. And I don't know. I was curious. Like I don't know if you see this the same way too, but I look back at kind of that era that you're talking about, 2011. And, I voted for Obama both times, and I still see him as more of a
Same.
moderate kind of
Hmm.
presidency. When people bring him up, sometimes I'm always like, I believe he was like the drone strike, like like he did all these drone strikes, and it's
Yeah.
just he's an interesting kind of like he's not as left obviously as the left is today.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know.
I mean, I was
Maybe I was just younger and I was
yeah.
enjoying the time or
Well, I
something.
mean, we were all much less informed than we realized we were, but I was a Bernie fan,
Yeah.
and so I but then we all got burned when he just like handed the presidency over to like
Yeah.
geriatric Joe, and
It
so.
seems like, yeah, that's what the Democrats do now. Is like they'll have an interesting candidate and then just throw him under the bus because
Hmm.
they think it's not viable or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, tell me about District 46. Is 46 right? Is that
House
right?
District 46.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about that and why you kind of got into this. Obviously, you explained some of that just now. Like
Yeah,
why
well,
you.
so House District 46 is where both you and I live. It's a group of neighborhoods in Southeast Portland. It's like Mount Tabor, Mount Scott, Arleta, Brentwood, Darlington, Lentz, and the edges of like Clinton, Hawthorne, Montevilla, Woodstock, kind of just this
Mhm.
big area. It's shaped like a giant number one, basically. It's kind of jagged though. It's not perfect
We're
edges.
the best part of Southeast, right? No,
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
would
kidding.
sure.
There's some
Yeah.
charm in there.
I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it. I mean, I've lived in this district for 4.5 years now. My partner
Okay.
and I bought a house on like 81st and Clinton area, so it's just like at the edge of like the Jade District and South Tabor, and so it's Confam's district.
Yeah.
She's been running for the past 2 terms, but she's running as in a Senate seat this year.
Okay.
So
Okay.
she's going to be leaving Oregon legislature, and I got tricked into doing this from some local politicians who were really attracted to the content that I was making on my Instagram because even though I've never really been a huge fan of politics, I talk about political issues from a real moderate perspective. And I've had a lot of success in getting through to people on the far left and getting them to like become moderates. And so when
You do
these,
seem good at that. Just to yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, if
You
you,
speak eloquently about it.
I again, I'm a Libra. I'm really good at mediating and diplomacy, and so I think that you just have to be really careful. You really have to walk on eggshells on
Yeah.
on how you explain something. Otherwise, you're going to trigger people because
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to identity politics, once a person identifies with a cause and they hear any form of disagreement, they get real agitated because they feel like they're being attacked. And I want to get people's guard down because that's not the approach that I'm trying to take. I really want to get through to people's heart, and it's possible. You just have to be really careful about how you discuss things. And so, um,
So they
uh,
kind of pushed you, or some friends of yours pushed you into that.
I mean, I learned my lesson. Like I've definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I've gotten better about figuring out how to get through to people. Meeting them where they're at, and them meeting me where I'm at, and yeah, it's been a challenge, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think I'm finally ready to like do this on a more macro level, which is
Okay, yeah.
yeah why I'm running for politics. But
And this is all in November, obviously, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and so I'm running as an NAV, non-affiliated voter, because obviously I was registered as a Democrat my entire adult voting life, and I only recently ran as NAV or re-registered as NAV as a suggestion by some local politicians who said that this will kind of guarantee my spot on the November ballot because it allows me to skip the primary because
Right, right.
a nonpartisan is basically their own party. Like you're not running against anybody in the primary. So it's strategic in that sense. It gives me a lot of extra time. Like my signatures aren't due until like August 13th or
Oh, that
so.
is, yeah. Because I was
Whereas,
just thinking, because I've heard, friends of mine and people who've been on the show complain about Oregon's primary system, but
Hmm.
this way you can just kind of bypass
Yeah.
most of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The problem with that, though, the challenge that I'm going to have is getting through to as many Democrats as possible because most voters, doesn't matter what your party is, they don't really care about anybody but the president. So they vote for the
Right. Right.
president, and then when it comes to all local politics, they just vote down the line
Party
whoever's in their
lines.
party. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not the best way to vote because I mean I've made that mistake in the past, and if you just look outside Portland, it's like, oh shoot, what have we done?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have a lot of outreach to do. The NAV group is one of the fastest growing parties,
Mm.
but it's not really as a result of people shifting away from one party or another. It has a lot more to do with like if you haven't registered to vote yet and you get your driver's license, they just automatically sign you up as an
Mm.
NAV. And so even though there's a lot of NAVs in Portland, they're probably going to be more left leaning just by virtue of being in a a blue state and in a very liberal democratic city. And so I have a lot of outreach to do to make sure that these Democrats know who I am, so that they don't just default to voting for
Right.
whichever Democrat wins the primary, which is likely to be Mary Lou Henrich.
Okay.
So
Yeah, what's funny is I walk my dog around here every day, and somebody over here has a sign for that. And for weeks I was like, I need to look her up because I'd never heard of her. But I
uh-huh.
did yesterday, and I was like, oh, I see who
She's a
she is.
nice
But
gal. She means well. I met her. She's a
she
very
didn't.
sweet
Yeah,
person. I
and I'm
don't want
not
to say
trying to
anything
be
bad.
ageist. I'm not trying to be ageist, but she did look a little older, and
Uh-huh.
I think me personally and a lot of a lot of voters I think are looking for younger
Mm-hmm.
electorates. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I'm not I'm not trying to throw shade to her or anything. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but you think she'll win the Democratic primary? And
Probably. The other guy is Willie Choatson, who
okay,
lives pretty close to here, I believe. And he's a Harvard Law graduate, I think.
okay.
I haven't seen anything with his campaign yet. I haven't
He
met him
might have
yet.
been. I had somebody come to my door like a month ago, and they're like, "Hey, somebody in your neighborhood's running for
Uh-huh.
something," I usually never talk to those people. I'm just like, okay,
Uh-huh.
whatever. You can leave me a pamphlet or whatever. But
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it might have been him. I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he looks like a nice guy. I've seen his photo, and you can get a lot
and they're
just like
both
looking at someone's
running for the
picture.
Dem
Hmm.
primary spot. Okay.
Yeah, so whoever wins between them. There was a third guy, but he had to back out because of like some bogus rule that you need proof of like 366 plus days of living in the district, and it has to be from DMV records. So even though he's
Mm,
lived in the district for longer than that,
he didn't have the.
no. And
Interesting.
so he had to pull out, which I just think is, not too fair, but it
Yeah,
is what it is.
I know. I'm glad you know all this stuff because the state legislature is something I want to learn more
Hmm.
about. I don't know that much about it, so.
I
But
don't
you seem
really
very knowledgeable.
it's all a front. I am not a political science major.
Okay.
I'm learning everything as I go along, and that was one of my trepidations with running because it's like I don't have any prior government experience. I'm not a political science major, and I said these concerns to like my campaign manager, who actually works for the Salem Capitol, and she's helped a lot of people in their campaigns, including Tulsi Gabbard for president.
Wow. Yeah.
And she said, Austin, don't even worry about it. Just like look at the people who are currently in office. It's a mess. They don't even know what they're doing. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, you're right. Just like parenthetical statement, see Portland. Like it almost doesn't matter if you
Yeah.
have this like prior experience
Well,
because,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I was just thinking it's almost like a more of a benefit nowadays. I
Uh
feel
huh.
like, that's on and I'm not saying how I feel about Trump, but I think that's something that helped him
Oh, right.
being an
Yeah.
outsider
I
and
didn't want to
not
use
having
him as an analogy, but
Yeah. No, I just mean in general, it's like my guest last week was the same way. He had no he's an elected state rep, but he had no experience.
uh
And
huh.
I think
Uh huh.
people want that. It's kind of refreshing and
Yeah, I can see that that's a benefit because what you don't want is like some career politician. And
right.
like I can't make this a career. I think I'm only gonna make like what, $35,000 a
Yeah, it's
year as an
not
Oregon legislator. It's not a livable
you're
wage.
not
And
a
then
millionaire, yeah.
yeah, and then as a practitioner, there's gonna be opportunity cost. So it's not like I'm making an additional 35,000 a year. I can't see patients when I'm busy doing
Yeah.
Oregon
I've
legislative
heard a lot about
work.
that. Yeah, the
So
ability to moonlight and all that stuff. And
mhm,
yeah, I was curious, like, because I'm really like the NAV thing's really appealing to me as a
mhm,
voter, but I'm curious, like, how is that really intimidating going up against? I would just imagine all the party candidates have all this money coming their way
they do.
from the party and stuff. And
Yeah. And so, for instance, Mary Lou Henrich, she's heavily funded by a lot of Democratic initiatives, and she has what this is what I've heard. I can't confirm it, but I heard that she has probably a lot of people who are working on her behalf who work for the Democratic Party. And so she's got a lot of canvassers going around
Mm-hmm.
and doing a lot of outreach. So I have a lot of competition. And I only need 51% of the vote to win.
Right,
And
right.
luckily, the majority of the Democrats that I've spoken to within my district, like whenever I go to the dog park down the street, I tell people, what I'm about. And most Democrats, about 95% of them, we all feel bait and switched. We all felt
Mm-hmm.
like we voted on policies that, we're guilty of voting on them. We voted in favor of Measure 110 and like essentially incentivizing homelessness and defunding the police and, increasing like harm reduction and,
Mm-hmm.
no bail and all these things that were very well intended, but they had inadvertent consequences that just increased homelessness, crime, and addiction. And so most people who are awake and aware enough to see that, and they're observant enough to recognize that, they want to revert back to the way things were. It's the ones who are still super propagandized, like the far left, who make the most noise. They they don't see it that way. They and a lot of the current Democratic candidates and current Democrats in politics right now, they're saying that, well, this is just a reflection of the times and that these policies that literally debunked themselves are just, they just need more time. But that's kind of at the expense of all of us. It's at the expense of our safe neighborhoods and, businesses that are failing because of
Mm-hmm.
that. And so they're really relieved, the people that I've spoken to, that I'm a moderate voice that's willing
Right.
to say what the others aren't willing to say and that I can represent them. So I think that's a big plus.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really do think it's like a growing thing. I was writing some, I don't know, stuff about it in my phone, but it's just, I don't know. I'm in that group of people,
Hmm.
and like you're saying earlier, I'm still, you know, I'm a registered Democrat, but I'm a moderate, and I'm, obviously support LGBTQ. I support weed legalization.
Hmm.
And I wrote down another thing. Oh, I'm pro-choice, obviously. So it's just like it's interesting that if you people on the far left, I think if you tell them you're a moderate, they assume you're not for any of those things. But
Right.
there's a big purple group in the middle,
Yeah.
I think, especially in the Portland metro area, that do support all that stuff
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
want a refreshing candidate that's
Mhm.
not on party
So
lines.
you're gonna vote for me, is that what you're saying?
Well, probably, probably. No, honestly, yeah. Like, I don't even, based on the candidates you just told me, I
Uh-huh.
would totally vote for you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's like it's funny because there's a lot of moderate Republicans who align with a lot of these things too. Like they support the LGBTQIA2 plus,
Hmm.
Black Indigenous people of color, civil rights. Ben Edel, for instance, he's one Republican candidate who supports me, and I call him like a diet Republican. Like
Diet.
because he
Yeah.
supports
Yeah.
gay marriage and civil rights and women's reproductive rights, and he's very anti-establishment.
Yeah.
But what makes him a Republican is that he's very conservatively, or sorry, what is it? Fiscally conservative. That's
Right.
what I meant
Right.
to say. Fiscally conservative, and he supports the Constitution and the Second Amendment. And so it's like you're taking like the pros of both sides
Hmm.
and getting rid of the cons. And I really think that there's so many different ways you can characterize a moderate. Ben West, for instance,
Yeah, I
the
was just gonna shout out him too because he's.
yeah.
I don't want to speak for his party affiliation, but he does kind of lean more conservative, and he was like critical in getting Oregon gay rights
Right.
going and stuff.
Yeah.
And
No, I met him the other night at Crush Bar, and we had a great time speaking for about 2 hours. And he is the one who, him and his partner, they
Mhm,
sued the state of Oregon in 2014, and they got gay marriage legalized.
mhm.
And so, I mean, that's pretty huge. Like you would
Yeah,
think that the left would just love and adore him for that. And then him
but
and
he
his
does he does get called a lot of names
he
online.
does.
But I
Well,
love what they're doing. He's doing in Clackamas County.
it's just bizarre because like him and his partner fostered a black son
Hmm.
when he was like 6 years old, and now he's 18. They had adopted him when he was like maybe 9 or so.
Hmm. I know he's playing football. Is what he told
Uh-huh.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But when he was running for Clackamas County Commissioner, because he was running as Republican, there were people on the far left who were accusing him of being a slave owner. They,
Oh wow.
they
Jeez.
showed pictures of him with his black son and called him a slave owner, and it was probably politically convenient for them to leave out the fact that he's gay and
Hmm.
introduce gay marriage. And so, yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling, but he's kind of a badass. I really
Yeah.
like Ben West a lot.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Yeah, I think both of those guys. I don't know. They're in this weird kind of middle. moderate ground
Yeah,
of
yeah.
which I think, yeah, again, I think is growing.
But the thing is, we all get along. See, like in the middle of the political spectrum, regardless of what party you're in, whether it's like libertarian, bipartisan, nonpartisan, moderate Democrat, moderate Republican, everybody gets along. We can like reach each other, we collaborate, we share ideas, we kind of,
Mhm.
for the most part, agree on what needs to be done. But it's when you start getting to like the far ends of the political spectrum with the far right and the far left, they're just like, it's a total civil war mentality. And
Totally,
so,
yeah.
yeah, trying to get rid of that.
It's a lot of fighting and stuff, and yeah. Um, I was curious about your doctorate. Doctor, can I call
Yeah,
you
you don't
doctor?
have to call me that. I'm pretty
I
modest,
just
actually.
like calling people doctor, but yeah, just tell me about that. And
Hmm.
um, I just like candidates that have that kind of background. I think it's
Uh-huh.
interesting that help people
Uh-huh.
on a human level and stuff.
Yeah. So I have my master's and my doctorate in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I went to the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, graduated over a year ago. And prior to that, or I've always been and still am, a deep tissue medical massage therapist. So
Okay.
I've had a really successful massage practice, private practice for 15 years now. I'm like booked through the end of the year. I'm really not taking any new patients. And especially now that I'm working out of my home, I don't really want people knowing where I live. And so I've already established things to where it's like I don't have to advertise anymore. But there was a point in like 2016 where I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life because it's cumbersome, it's arduous work, it's really hard doing deep tissue on every single person that you see. And so I wanted to expand my scope of practice and decided to go to acupuncture school because the gal that I was working with at this acupuncture clinic happened to be this like really prestigious professor at OCOM. And she was like, Austin, you need to go to OCOM and I will write your letter of recommendation. And so I was like, okay, thanks, Hong. And so I did that and it was intense. And it occurred during the pandemic, which was just like an extra layer of stress. And I was kind of a very politically vocal person during all of that. And so there was a lot of drama and trauma as a result of that. And so after school had happened, I was in a recovery deficit. I mean, I was already in a recovery deficit prior to school, and it's just funny that, I in order to elevate my career, I had to go into a program that causes burnout all by itself when I was
Mm,
already burnt out. And
hmm.
so after I graduated, I kind of crashed for about a year. Didn't do anything, didn't want to work, didn't, study or anything, just so I could really recover. But then since then, now I've been rebuilding my practice and I'm so busy. Like patients come into my home, they see everything, and I have a 3-story house. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. I have a front and backyard. So there's a lot to maintain in order to
Mm,
keep things as professional as possible. And so I'm pretty busy. And now that I've added the campaign on my list
yeah,
of things to
right.
do, it's like I just don't have any free time. So I put my licensure on hold because that's cumbersome in itself, having to study for the exams and pay for them. But I have no shame in that because I'm doing good things. I'm still, treating patients. I'm still, working towards doing something for the community. It's a great way to get me out of the treatment room. It's a nice change of
Mm,
scenery, and then
hmm.
I get to meet a lot of new people and do fun and cool things like this. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was curious, is that am I thinking of the right one? Is that the school that's kind of downtown by the
Hmm.
PSU sort of?
Yeah. Well, so it's so the one by PSU, that one's the naturopathic
That's
college,
what I'm
by
thinking of. Okay.
at the other end of the Ross Island Bridge. That's NUNM. It used
That's
to
what
be
I'm
called
thinking of.
NCNM, and
Okay.
I know a lot of people who've gone there and became naturopaths, and they have an acupuncture program there as
Okay.
well. But OCOM is in like Old Town Chinatown.
Okay. Gotcha.
Hmm.
All right. Cool. Um, yeah, I was going to ask you about however far you want to go in this, what you'd like to see change with Multnomah County. And I know that's not what you're running for, but just since we both kind of live in this area,
Uh-huh.
like what you'd like
Well,
to see.
yeah. I mean, everything that I want to do on the state level is really going to be a big focus on Portland as well, because I mean, I think Portland has been the most negatively impacted by a lot of these policies and procedures that, I mean, I'm sure you voted in favor of them, like Measure 110 and all these
Yeah.
other things. And so,
And
yeah.
I agree with you in the sense that, I don't know the exact number, but I imagine Salem, a lot of what they do is Democratic control over
Hmm.
trying to control what Portland does.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
would
Well, I mean, what? We have 60 total House districts in Oregon. 40 of them, I believe, are like in the Portland
Is that
metro
right?
area.
Wow,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so because it's mostly Democratic leaning, basically what we decide in the Portland metro area decides on behalf of the entire
Right.
state. And so that's one of the reasons why I was asked to run so that I could create some balance,
Yeah.
say yay or nay to House bills that, I intuitively don't think would really benefit, the whole.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
Portland Metro. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so for Portland, I mean, I really want to help solve the homelessness issue. And there's a lot of comprehensive, tenable solutions that we're working. Actually, it was within Multnomah County, but it was over in Gresham. Kevin Dahlgren, you know him. He
Hmm.
was,
Hmm.
single-handedly helping in ways that most people who worked with the homeless just couldn't do. Like he was able to change Gresham from being like the highest homeless population per capita to the lowest. And Clackamas County is doing the same thing. They've diminished the homeless crisis by 65% down to
Yeah, I saw
35%.
that drop they had. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm networking with both Ben West and Kevin Dahlgren so that I can implement those same strategies here, hopefully, if I get elected. And then obviously, I have opinions about Measure 110.
Hmm.
Uh, it was amended by House Bill 4002.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, do you think that went far enough, or are you happy
It
with it?
Yes and no. It's a step in the right direction. One of the issues, though, is that if you kind of look at how the criminal justice system in Multnomah County, or I guess in all of Oregon, has been impaired by other initiatives, that we're not actually handling crimes the way we should. So, like for instance, if you look at this one gal, she's a homeless pyromaniac. She burnt down the Portland garment factory in the Montevilla neighborhood,
Mm.
and she's already on her like ninth or 10th
I
arrest
remember, yeah,
warrant.
hearing about that. Yeah.
Because essentially what happens is if you commit a crime, and this is what I've heard. If you commit a crime, you get taken into jail, but you just get booked. They take your information and they basically set your court date. And then if you can't afford bail, they just release you. And I think if you can't afford bail, I think it's something cheap, like only like 25 bucks or something
Hmm.
like that. But basically, criminals are going back out onto the street, and there's really no pressure or incentive for them to show up to their trial date.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so what happens is they get a failure to appear, and they get a warrant out for their arrest. And if they do get caught, they get arrested, and it becomes this perpetual cycle of just like being released, not showing up to their trial, getting arrested again.
Hmm.
And so she's on her ninth or 10th arrest warrant, and she's still going around, lighting things on fire, threatening to shoot neighbors with a pellet gun. And like the neighbors and business owners, they just feel like they have their hands tied because the police officers also have their hands tied because they're just not effectively, you know,
Yeah.
handling
Yeah.
crimes like they used to. And I was listening to Rational in Portland. What was her name? Nicole Busher. She's like the
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, she's coming on here eventually.
oh,
I've already
awesome.
met with her, but yeah, and I'll do a whole breakdown. I'll do as good as I can. I can't do as good as Kristen and Rational Morning because she's a lawyer and
Mm-hmm.
she thinks way differently than me. But if you listen to that episode, yeah, like that is a
Mm-hmm.
great breakdown of the process of our jail.
Yeah, yeah, because
And
she clears up all the misconceptions of how corrections
yeah,
handles things, both historically and currently, as a result of 2020, and
and also kind of how their hands are tied, and they have all this jail space that we
yeah,
can't use, and
250 beds, they're
yeah,
empty.
yeah.
Meanwhile, you have, and I think, is it a total of 250 beds, and there's just
It's
nobody in there,
It's a
or
lot. I know that, yeah, like they have a couple different jail locations, and some of them have entire wings that are unused, and
yeah, and meanwhile, there's just rampant crime in the street.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also, yeah, I don't know. I'll get into it when she comes on here, but
Mm-hmm.
I just have become a converted believer of using a lot of that space for
Mm-hmm.
treatment and
Mm-hmm.
addiction treatment
Right.
specifically,
Uh-huh.
which a lot of people push back against. But I'm just like, I see no problem with it. I've talked about this a lot with her and other people, but yeah, it is a big problem here. And I was going to say, I want to shout out Nathan Vasquez. Like, if anyone wants to see, crime changes in the way we prosecute
Yeah.
crime here, the primary race is next month, so it's really important,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, to
Mm-hmm.
have some kind of change there. But
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're calling Portland a Schmidt show right now.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's a
that's one.
mess.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all kind of similarly tied together. I'm not saying that like homelessness and crime are the same thing, but there's a lot of overlap, and
Yes, I was gonna say
and
that.
addiction is a big
Uh-huh.
part of it too. And so yeah, I think we can probably agree on a lot of the county changes. Keep complaining, obviously, about the ambulance thing. It
Mm-hmm.
drives me crazy up here. And we learned more this year. I think I don't know if Shane Kavanaugh broke this story, but it makes sense now that we know that Jessica Vega Peterson or whoever's in that role can basically eliminate things off the county agenda that they don't like.
Right.
And so it all kind of makes sense why we don't see these ideas kind of percolate and
Uh-huh.
make it to a vote. But yeah, that was a long-winded thing of saying the county changes. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say about that before we
I mean, I can
ask you
talk
about?
about my personal experience of I've been arrested before. When I was
Oh yeah.
18, I got caught with possession of mushrooms.
Oh
And
wow.
and it's funny because, mushroom psilocybin therapy is now protected by
Yeah, it's
Measure
a
109. And
yeah, and I actually, man, that's funny you brought that up because like a month ago, I was at a party and I talked to somebody who is like a licensed therapist for, and she like
hmm
distributes mushrooms to
hmm
patients and
yeah,
stuff.
one of my friends is a naturopath, and she went through the Inner Trek training to be a psilocybin therapist.
Yeah,
So
but so you have kind of a
yeah,
inside,
so like 19 years ago, I was 18. It was down in Marion County, down in Salem. And I got caught with possession of mushrooms, which at the time was a Class C felony. And
wow, yeah.
the absolute worst that could have happened to me, sentence wise, could have been 366 days in jail or in prison.
Wow, yeah,
And there's a difference between jail and prison that most people don't know, and
right.
they often conflate the two. Prison is a sentencing of 366 days or more, and it's usually more serious crimes like felonies, and it's a much more dangerous environment in a
Hmm.
different facility.
Usually long term, yeah,
Yeah, long-term
federal
stuff.
crimes or
But then jail is 365 days or less, and usually for, things like misdemeanors. And so just wanted to clear that up because a lot of people mention jail
you're
when they
right. They
really
use
mean
them
prison. Yeah,
interchangeably.
they don't
Yeah,
really know what they're talking about.
yeah.
But that sentencing is actually totally up to the DA and the judge. And the way that Marion County and even Clackamas County, Multnomah County, and Washington County usually handle drug offenses is that they didn't actually jail people for drug offenses,
Mm,
especially if it was a first time offense. They would usually only send people to jail if they had committed other crimes simultaneously, like
mm,
theft or battery or rape or things like that. And so, with my firsthand experience, I'm actually able to debunk a lot of these, sort of woke misperceptions on how the criminal justice system handles
right.
drug offenses because,
Criminalizing addiction, as they would
yeah,
say. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so it's like, they think that they don't offer treatment when I was actually required to enter into drug diversion
Really?
program for my probation. And so I saw a drug counselor. I was getting random urinalysis tests. I had to attend AA meetings and NA meetings,
Wow.
and I was able to meet a lot of other people who were in this system. And like, I was never an addict or a
Yeah, I was gonna say
criminal.
at 18 or whatever, that's
I
kind
know.
of a lot, but
Yeah, it was kind of a lot, but I learned a lot too. And I saw that people who were in this system, it kept them clean. It kept them out of trouble because if we ever stepped out of line, we could get thrown in jail.
mm,
And so it actually worked. They did offer treatment. And then there's this misconception that this drug charge would follow me around for the rest of my life and
mm,
create all of these obstacles into like getting into school or finding a place to rent or, having a career. And none of that is true. Like,
okay, yeah,
I was able to still attend 9.5 years of, very woke liberal Portland colleges. I got my master's and my doctorate. I've never had an issue with renting a place to live. I was able to become, a licensed massage therapist and have run a really successful practice for 15 years. Never had an issue with finding a clinic to rent out of. And then my partner and I, we bought our house 4.5 years ago. So it's like,
yeah,
I understand the compassion behind it and that, the intentions were good, but I'm just so glad that the liberal misconceptions are as wrong about it as they are passionate about it. Otherwise, I might actually be dying in the street of fentanyl right now because I
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
able to gain, anything that I've accomplished. And so yeah, I
That's
just wanted to
yeah,
say
no, it's a
that.
really cool, yeah, kind of an amazing story or whatever experience, whatever that is. Because I was gonna say too, I've mentioned a couple times on the show, and I'm I'm trying to kind of level with you of like I did a lot of drugs in my 20s. I've definitely done mushrooms, and that's not like I don't know. I'm just trying to not have people see you in a weird light because
Uh-huh.
a lot of young people do mushrooms, and
Right.
obviously now, like you
Yeah.
said, it's
No,
medically
it's yeah,
legal here now.
it's
So
recognized and kind of protected.
yeah,
But I should, admit to that and own it and take
yeah, no, I
responsibility for it because it's probably people are gonna try to use it
right,
against
right,
me because
yeah,
I'm sure if you go on Google and search Austin Daniel, Oregon, that's might be like the top thing on the list is
yeah.
like my drug
And
charge
that
from
is an
like many years
interesting,
ago.
like, just highlighting all the stuff you just did. Like
hmm
that's it is very interesting because I wouldn't know, yeah, how those those charges or whatever really
hmm
played out, and
hmm
because yeah, people still are pointing to that with this election this year of
Uh-huh.
like we're gonna. lock people up for smoking a joint or whatever,
They
all
just
this
don't
stuff.
do
And
that. And I mean, it might have happened in like in the distant past or in other places in the country, but you can't superimpose what happens in the past or in like places far away on what's
yeah,
happening here. You
yeah,
have to really look at things from a local level. And so I know it's well intended, but it's detached from reality.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's really interesting. Okay, I wanted to ask you about this right to disconnect bill. I was talking to you a little before we
Uh-huh.
recorded about it. Um, it's more just interesting to me because I've been watching these things pop up around the globe. And now California has a bill that's going through their legislature, which would ban employers from contacting their employees after hours with
Mm-hmm.
any kind of electronic communication, and eventually it would fine those employers if they did. But I'm just curious your take on that, and like if you think Oregon should take up a bill like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this will never affect me as a practitioner because I treat patients and, I mean, anyone can just really message me whenever, and I'm pretty good at just like getting back to them when it's necessary. Nothing's
You're
ever
kind of 24/7 anyway.
yeah, and I'm not an emergency person, an emergency responder, so it's like there never is an emergency when people contact me. But in terms of my partner, he works in the corporate world. He only has a limited number of days of PTO, paid time off, and so if he's ever on vacation, he still gets bothered. He still gets phone calls or emails, and the his employer or people who message him, they expect an immediate response because he's so good at his job. They really need him. They can't really afford to have him taking PTO, and so it's kind of unfair to him because he's already exhausted all of his PTO for the year, and now he wishes that he can take some more time off on other days, but it's like he didn't even have real PTO because he
Right.
was being bothered. He was technically working on days that he was supposed to have off. So I would support that. I definitely would. I think it's fair to leave people alone when they're
Mm,
not supposed to be working. They're off the clock. It's like not everyone's on call unless you sign up for that. Like if
right,
you're an
right. It's a
on-call nurse,
designated
yeah,
position.
that's something that you committed to, then that's fair. But I'm a Libra. I'm all about fairness. If you didn't commit to that, it's not fair.
Yeah.
So
Do you see I feel like if that made it, or if there was a bill in Oregon, it would probably pass here because that's just a popular. It seems like popular among
probably,
both parties, but I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it seems pretty bipartisan or nonpartisan of a. It doesn't seem very like a politicized thing. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people could agree on that.
Cool. Yeah.
It would probably pass here.
I was just curious, yeah. And I'm like of the position I support it, but I also am of the position like I think regulating that would be really difficult because you start
Uh-huh.
looking at people's texts and emails and it gets really granular.
Well,
But
yeah,
I think the idea
now
is good.
okay, now I'm starting to wonder what could possibly be the pros and cons to this. Like, is this gonna get real Big Brother like, Are
Yeah.
they gonna
Because I
yeah.
believe the California one, it's like they'll be like every instance, which would be an email or text, it was
Uh-huh.
like $100 fine to the company, and you
Oh,
could see how that could add
whoa.
up,
And who would
and they'd
that
be
fine go to? It's
searching.
not necessarily gonna pay the person who's working off the clock. It's gonna probably what, go to the state or something?
Yeah. So it is like
Hmm.
a. I think the spirit of those uh, type of laws are interesting, but regulation would be difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I guess it just depends how it's formatted. And, I I'm a Libra. I have to like know all the pros and cons of everything and weigh them out
Yeah.
before I really make a
Look at the
decision.
whole
Yeah,
picture.
get every
Yeah.
perspective I can.
Tell me about your Northwest story. Did you grow up here? Did you
Hmm.
move out here?
Yeah, so I'm a native Oregonian. I grew up in Salem, born and raised there until I was 18 years old. That's when I finally moved to Portland and I went to PSU because I was attracted to their choral program. And so I was a vocal music major and they made me study opera,
Oh, okay.
which
I'm such an idiot. When you said choral, I was thinking of like Coral Reef,
oh yeah,
but
close.
choir, is that what you're talking about?
Choir,
Okay, I
yes,
got you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been a professional singer ever since I basically moved to
That's cool.
to
Yeah.
Portland because when you're in the PSU chamber choir, you get deeply connected with the professional choir scene, and so I've sung in professional choirs ever since then. I currently get paid to sing at First Presbyterian Church in downtown
That's cool.
Portland.
That's cool.
I've done that for 7 years. I did that for 6 years back in like 2006 to 2012, and then I took like an 11-year break, and now I've been back for almost the last year, just because I had free time since graduating from school. And yeah, so I love to sing. But so when it came to opera, I'm a low bass, and
Okay.
like the roles for low basses are kind of boring. And then I think as a whole, I think operas are a little kind of on the boring side. They're really
Mm-hmm.
long and drawn out. And what I like about operas are the songs that make them famous, that are usually sung by like the tenor or the soprano or even the
Mm.
alto. But I, being a low bass, it's just kind of
You just
blasé.
kind
And
of do the
so,
same notes and stuff. And
yeah, I would have rather, gone into like musical theater. Like I was actually the voice of the plant in Little Shop of Horrors
oh, that's
once in high
cool. That's
school.
cool. Yeah.
So that was cool. But I mean that's that and one like other play that I did, musical in eighth grade. That's my only theater experience. But yeah, I'm much better at singing that type of genre. I've sung in jazz choir all through seventh grade through like my freshman year of college. And so
You've been
um
doing it a long time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So what? I'm 37 now, so 23 years,
Yeah.
24 years.
I was wondering, is there anything, I don't know anything about that world. Do you have to like protect your voice and or do you do
Yes and
anything to,
no. I mean, I was a smoker for a long time.
I was too. Yeah.
I smoked cigarettes. I started probably like I was 15, which is I'm
Yeah.
kind of ashamed of. And then I
Yeah.
quit July 19th of 2014.
Okay.
So
That's
I
probably
haven't
around the same time I quit.
Yeah, so I haven't had a cigarette in like almost 10 years, which is great. But I also smoked a lot of pot too. So I
Yeah.
was a huge pothead for like off and on for 22 years. I actually quit last November so that I could focus on studying for my exams, and then I shifted to doing the campaign. And so I haven't used cannabis in like over 4 months now. And so I
Wow.
feel very clear. I'm
God bless
actually
you, because I can't make it that long.
well, I'm able to have this interview without being like, where was I going with that
Yeah,
again?
no, it is cool. Like I've taken long breaks before,
Yeah.
and it is quite a bit different
Uh-huh.
mental clarity when you get
Yeah,
high. Yeah.
yeah. So it's nice. Yeah. But it's funny though because I still had natural ability even though I was a smoker and there's people who weren't smoking. They're like, "Gosh, why is he still like getting
You
all of
still are
like the
just good.
solos and things like that?" Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's just genetic, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah, I would
nobody
say that
else in
was
my family sings, but
comedy stuff too. I'm like, it's one of those, I think there's certain areas in life where it's like you have your born skill and then you can train anyone can train themselves up to a certain point with just
mhm.
not skill. And it sounds like kind of the same
Right.
thing what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, very similar.
But so that's cool. I was gonna ask, so you, because this is what I did when you were like 18 or 19, you basically were like, I'm going to Portland. Like you just
Yeah,
picked it
well,
up.
I mean, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, because at that time I had gotten caught with possession of
Right. It was right
mushrooms,
around
and so I
then.
had this
Yeah.
looming felony charge over my head for like my entire freshman year at
So
PSU,
you're kind of like, what do I do? And yeah.
yeah, and so it's just like PSU. It was close enough to home because my parents still live in Salem and they're still there today, and so it was just easy to stay connected. And but yeah, so I my did you want to talk me to talk about like my experience in Salem
If
or
you, I
like my
mean,
family
as
or
much as
anything or
you want, I was gonna ask because I've had guests on here who went to. This is getting really in the weeds, but it went to McNary, and I
uh-huh.
had when I was like 16, 17, I had my first one of my first films play there. It was like the McNary Film Festival, high
Oh,
school
funny.
festival. But
Uh-huh.
so I don't know,
They had a good choir.
but I had, and then I had another guest who was at the other. I forget the name of the other Salem high
Hmm.
school. I don't even
Well,
remember.
I
But
went to South Salem High School and then I went to West the first year that they opened up, but I hated it. And so I went back to South my
okay,
junior and senior year.
yeah, I
But
don't know much. I've been there. I've been to Salem a couple times to the governor's mansion when Kate Brown was the governor. I've
hmm
shot some interviews and stuff with her, but I don't know much about Salem other than
hmm
that. And obviously the Capitol's there in the legislature.
Right.
But
Yeah. Um, I mean, I don't really want to talk much about Salem. I really want to talk more about like my family because
yeah,
I
you
am
can talk about it.
I'm
Yeah,
a person of color technically.
yeah, yeah.
Like my dad's a white guy and my mom's a Filipino, so I'm half
Okay,
Filipino, half white.
gotcha.
And so my mom's parents, my Lolo and Lola, they're still down there. They're still alive. They're great. But my dad, he was like one of 8 children. And one of my uncles married a Vietnamese woman. One of my uncles married a Mexican, and then my dad married a Filipino. So when it comes to like all my cousins, it's like we
Yeah,
had full and half Filipinos, full and half Vietnamese, full and half Mexicans, and then everyone else was white. And then like I'm the gay one, and then my aunt's a lesbian. So we kind of like checked off all of like the
there's a lot of
DEI
culture in there.
boxes.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
yeah,
very multicultural. I felt like I had a really blessed upbringing, and yeah, so I just never really saw like racism as a problem. I've
totally. Yeah.
never felt oppressed my whole life, even though I'm a gay person of color. Not, I've never felt oppressed in Portland because it's already a very liberal,
Hmm. Hmm.
blue state kind of a city. But even Salem, which is a bit more conservative, I've never felt oppressed. And so I don't really pander to that concept of like, people who are Black, Indigenous people of color and, LGBT, that we're oppressed and lacking in privilege. I don't agree with any of that. I think I have a lot of privilege, although I don't really want to call it privilege. I would rather call it accomplishment.
Mm.
And then like any privilege that I did have actually came from my Filipino grandparents because
Mm.
they're the wealthier ones. My My dad's family, they're pretty modest. They didn't make a lot of money, but still amazing, incredible people. But it's usually my Filipino grandparents that have bailed us out whenever we
That's
needed things.
yeah.
And so
Uh,
we were privileged because of their accomplishment. And so I don't really, I, I understand the concept of white privilege, but it's like my dad didn't have a lot of white privilege. And there are a lot of like homeless people who are white that clearly
yeah,
can't lift
yeah.
themselves out of homelessness with their
It's
privilege.
it's
So,
something, yeah, I think about a lot because I try to think about people more as in class lines because I grew
mm-hmm,
up very poor in a mobile home with a single parent on welfare and stuff, and there's a lot of poor white people out there too. There's
mm-hmm,
a lot of poor people of every color.
right.
But that is really interesting. I was gonna say my stepmom is actually Filipino. She might be
Oh,
listening right
cool.
now. Shout out to Esther if she's watching. But
Hi,
she was
Esther.
always cooking amazing food whenever I visited.
Yeah.
But that's cool. Yeah, I like learning about people's family and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let me get into some of these goofy questions here.
Oh, yeah.
Checking the time. So okay, let's say you're parking like you just did here in a normal spot. I always say a painted line spot. I don't know if that makes sense to
Uh-huh.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some people get confused when I say that, but do you back in or do you pull in?
Well, I didn't
Or do
back
you
in when I
take
was
up three
here.
spots?
I mean, it depends. It depends on the
Yeah.
circumstance. Like if I can tell that there's going to be a lot of congestion and it would be easier to like back in so that I
Mm,
can just, because I don't want to back out and like accidentally hit somebody. So I'm
yeah.
like I try to have the
That
foresight
is
for
a
that.
yeah, something
But
to think about because I got a car hit that way once when somebody pulled
uh-huh.
out. Makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, if I'm not really thinking about it, usually I'll just pull
Okay.
in.
All right. Um, which fruit do you think you could throw the farthest? If you picked up a fruit in your hand and just threw it like across a football field.
Oh. Well, it would have to be like something that's dense and like small enough, like a baseball or something,
Mm-hmm.
like an orange or a apple or a like a nectarine or something. Or
Mm.
I don't. You, that's
Any of
such a
those?
funny question.
Yeah. Yeah, and the funny thing is I don't know the answer. I've only had
Watermelon wouldn't work. That's too
watermelon
big.
work.
No.
Yeah. I don't know the actual correct answer, but I'm curious what people think they
Hmm.
could do.
Or like,
I've heard those are because everyone wants to go the baseball size, and it makes
uh-huh.
sense.
A banana is like shaped like a boomerang. Would
I
that
know.
work?
I always say the banana
Y-
because in my mind it just keeps going. I don't know if that
Uh-huh.
makes sense, but it just keeps like pushing itself
Have you
forward.
ever experimented?
I don't. Maybe I'll do it sometime for the show and like put a
Uh-huh.
clip in or
That'd
something.
be
That'd be
fun.
funny.
I'll
Yeah.
do it. I'll do it with you.
Yeah, or maybe we can. Yeah, like my guest can start like recording it, and maybe I'll
Uh-huh.
make like a compilation. That'd be funny.
Cool.
Um, all right, peanut butter. Do you like crunchy, smooth peanut butter? Do you like stir, no stir?
Oh,
Or maybe you
depends.
don't like peanut butter.
Everything depends. I'm a Libra. And so it's like if I'm just like eating it out of the jar with a
Yeah,
spoon,
which I do. Some people think that's
crunchy because
disgusting.
I like the texture. Or if I'm like making like peanut sauce, crunchy because then I don't have to add, crushed peanuts because it's already in there.
Mm.
But like if I want to like spread it on toast or like freeze it and eat it with ice cream, I like it smooth.
Wait, what? I've never even heard of that. That sounds amazing.
What have you ever had like the ice cream brand Umpqua? Like they
Yeah.
had the chocolate peanut butter ice cream, which is like
Okay.
so Bombay. Like that has, soft peanut butter in it.
I see. Okay. But you're saying if you do make your own that way, you can,
Or I don't make my own.
or you
I just
combine the
have vanilla,
ingredients.
chocolate ice cream and then
Yeah.
I just like take some frozen peanut butter and just,
That's just, I've never heard of that. That's cool.
it's
Um,
what a stoner would do.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking about it. I was talking about this yesterday because a lot of times, maybe you've done this. You take Oreos and just dip it in the jar,
Mm-hmm.
or like any cookie or whatever. I'm gonna get diabetes one day, but like, I've done all that. I was gonna shout out too. I tried PB Fit this week. I don't know if you ever tried that. It's like a dry. It's like a powder peanut
Yeah,
butter,
I've
and then
seen
you
that.
mix it with water,
Mm-hmm.
and it was actually not as bad as I thought it would be. But
Uh-huh. Yeah, one of my
uh,
friends adds it to his post-workout shakes.
okay,
Uh-huh.
I'm on a mission to try every single peanut butter on the planet. So,
Uh-huh.
um, do you have a favorite type of French fry? You like crinkle cut, regular fry, waffle fry,
I
tater tots,
mean,
JoJo's? Some people got in an argument with me that tater tots are even a type of fry, but I think they
they
are.
are. They're potatoes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
fried potatoes.
I had tater tots the other day and it depends on what's available. Like if I just have like normal fries and tater tots to choose from, I'll choose tater tots. If it's normal fries and a waffle fry to choose from, which I had last night at Burgerville,
You had waffle fries?
yeah, I had waffle fries.
Nice.
I think curly fries are probably my
I
favorite
love
though.
curly fries. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
so
it's
good.
never an option though. Where do you get those?
I know The one I always I always go to Jack in the Box because they have them, but
Oh, they do?
actually Nathan Vasquez when he was on here said Arby's has good curly fries, and I haven't tried it.
I'm kind of a
Um,
food snob, and
and I know
no
it's fast
offense.
food.
I
I know,
know. I
yeah.
mean, I just said I ate at Burgerville, but I feel like that's like a different
They're
type
a
of
little
fast food.
elevated,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
a bit more
It's local
elevated.
beef and stuff,
Yeah,
and
ever since I saw Super Size Me in middle school, I was like,
yeah,
I don't know if I can
it
eat.
is. But and I don't know if you've ever seen
No
the
judgment.
if you've ever no, it's like I know all that stuff and I just eat it anyway because I'm
Yeah,
gross. But if you ever seen the
enjoy life.
second one of those, Super Size Me 2, that's even
No, I haven't.
it's good. It gets into big chicken and like
Ugh,
Foster Farms and all that stuff,
yeah,
and he
gross.
opens his own chicken restaurant. It's really interesting.
Uh,
Um, I just was gonna add this one in here because I was talking about this week with some people. Do you have
mhm.
a aside from French fries? Do you have like a top side? Like, because I got in this argument of like some people don't think that fries are the best side that you can have on a meal.
Oh, well,
Like, what would be a second
there's like,
to
what
that?
are the options? Like fries, soup, or salad,
Yeah, any of
or
that stuff, or we started talking about like mashed
potato
potatoes or
salad,
like
or yeah, mashed
coleslaw
potatoes,
or
coleslaw.
biscuits or whatever.
Uh-huh. I I I love food. I'm pretty, ambivalent. I'll eat anything as long as it's gluten free.
Okay, you don't like the gluten,
Yeah.
or you can eat the gluten, or
I used to be able to eat gluten, and then it caught up with me, and so I've been gluten free since 2015. I just get body aches and
it
pains,
just works
and
better
I get
with.
super lethargic and a lot of brain fog. Like I wouldn't be here right now if I ate wheat yesterday. I'd
Okay,
be like, dude, I gotta cancel. I'm gonna be out for a few
it's
days. So
understandable. Yeah,
yeah,
everyone
it's
gets to know their own body and like what it
hmm
can eat and
I
stuff.
miss it, and the gluten free options they've gotten so much better. They're not all
I bet.
nasty and
Yeah,
grainy like they used to be.
there's a lot
Yeah.
more products and stuff out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say you're getting ice cream. Do you go cup, waffle cone, regular cone, or like Sandeep said, he'll just buy a carton and walk out of there.
Oh,
Just
I
like buy
watched
it.
that. He
Yeah,
was that was in reference to Salt and Straw, right?
I think so, or a pint or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Well, that those lines are just
they
ridiculous.
are. Yeah,
Like I
I would never wait in those.
when I learned that you could do that, that's what I started doing. I was just going just buy the pint. But I mean, if the line is short and it's, manageable, and if they have a gluten-free waffle cone, I will go for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh,
Do you have you seen one of those? Do you know if they
no.
exist? Okay.
If you ever see
Maybe
one,
somebody
please
can
tell
make
me.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, do you keep your butter in the fridge or just out? Do you leave it out?
Well, we have too much butter, so we keep it in the fridge until like we take it out. But I need to get one of those actual like
The tin thing or
things.
the
Yeah, like the
cover
cover,
thing?
because otherwise I'm just either leaving it on the counter exposed to the air, which is kind of gross,
Yeah.
or I'm putting it in a Tupperware container.
Okay.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
Um, if you could pick, if you were forced to pick a gigantic brand to run, what would it be? Like if it was like Nike or
Oh, weird.
something like that,
I
or
wasn't expecting this question.
it's a newer one I've been asking
Is
people,
it?
but yeah.
Oh, Nike. That's like a clothing brand. I don't
Yeah.
know if I would pick a clothing brand. It's so funny. I've never really been into like brand names or like seeing like brands on people's
Yeah.
clothing. I
Some
like
people
being
don't
kind of
like that stuff.
brandless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a food brand because I'm such a food snob. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not ready
That's
for
okay. That's okay. I mean,
it.
yeah, if you're a foodie, I was gonna say even a restaurant would be
Hmm.
acceptable. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
needed that. Which gets me into my other. I was gonna say, do you do you have a good meal recently, or even a business you want to shout out that you've been to recently?
Um, yeah.
Doesn't
Got
have
me
to be.
stumped.
No, it doesn't have to
Usually
be a
I'm
restaurant.
like
Usually, I'll say if you have a
on it.
meal, but like, or if you've just like been somewhere local recently that you really
Well, I
enjoyed.
went to actually this really cool, it was a vegan restaurant, and I'm very impressed with it. It's called like the White Rabbit, or the Rabbit at the Emerald Room or something like
Okay,
that.
sounds
It's
cool.
yeah, it was really bougie. You walk in and like you can see this like distillery, and it's all like copper plated or brass or
Mm,
whatever, and it's just
shiny
yeah,
brass.
yeah, and it's just a lot of like gold plated things all over the place. It was very cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and the food was really tasty. They had a lot of gluten-free options, and like their fake meat products actually were very impressive.
Okay,
And yeah,
I
yeah,
still have not tried one of those, but I want to try one. I want
yeah.
to try some.
I'm
Was it
butchering the
plant
name.
based or
Yeah,
the
everything was
fake plant? Okay,
plant-based. But I'm not vegan anymore. I was vegan for like 2 years, just as an ethnographic kind of experience,
yeah.
like kind of an anthropological approach to it. But I'm not doing that anymore. But I like Dick's Burgers. Dick's
Oh yeah,
Primal Burger.
on
Yeah,
Woodstock, is there?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've
Well,
actually
let's
never
just.
been, but I want to go. Yeah.
They have really high quality meat. It's everything's grass fed, like I'm assuming organic. And then the guy who runs it, he's a libertarian. He's super cool.
Really?
Yeah, very
Maybe I should hit
awake.
him up and see if he wants to come on here.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
he's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I always I go to Lutz up there, and I'll go to the Hawaiian place that's kind of nearby there too. And I don't know. There's a lot of good. There used to be a pizza place there. I don't know if that's still there, but a lot of good local kind of
Hmm.
things. Um, yeah. So if people want to, or like what you're saying, want to donate, what's like your website and all that stuff? And
Oh, so my website is austinfororegon.com. FOR, not the number four, but just
FOR.
austinfororegon.com. And you have to just find the button that says donate, and then that brings people to my Anadot account. And yeah, they can donate there. And I need donations. Like I hate asking people for money. I've never been a salesman. But as it turns out, running a campaign is actually really expensive.
Yeah.
Like even just like the mailers that go around to like
Totally.
the
Totally.
40,000 registered voters, those are 50 cents per mailer. So that's going to be about $20,000 just
Yeah.
to send out
And it's
one
funny
thing
because
like that.
yeah, those things that and canvassing sound really stupid to me, or maybe a lot of people, but it is tremendously expensive, and that's kind of how you have to do it, at
Right.
least in Oregon.
Uh-huh.
But so yeah, if you want to donate, and I'll send you a donation. I give a donation to
Oh, I
anyone who comes on
appreciate you
here.
so
Yeah.
much. Thank you.
Um, and what are your socials and stuff? Is it all the same?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, Austin for Oregon on
Cool.
Twitter, X, on Instagram as well. Yeah.
So yeah, go follow him. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything bugging you that you want to talk about before we wrap it up here?
No, not at the top of my head. I mean, I can talk for hours about so many things, and I'm glad that we didn't go too deep into any rabbit holes, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No, this is
because I
fun.
can.
Yeah. This is a fun combo, and
Uh-huh.
like I said, I'll be supporting you.
Uh-huh.
I like what you're. I don't know. I like the kind of middle ground message that you have, and maybe
It's
it is because you're a
important.
Libra. I think it's.
Well, it's a Libra thing, and it's also kind of like a very Taoist perspective, like the
Mm,
balance of yin and yang, and a very Buddhist perspective of like, choosing moderation.
yeah.
You don't, the difference between a medicine and a poison is dosage.
Mm,
And you can apply that to anything. And so it's like really just everything to an appropriate extent. Moderation is key. Keep everything balanced. If it's too far right or too far left, it just upsets the natural balance of
mm,
things. And
mm.
so, yeah, that's kind of the way to live life, I think.
Cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, it sounds. I would probably agree with that. Well, thanks for coming on. Yeah,
Yeah.
this was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.